All right, YouTube. So, in the midst of talks between the U.S. and Cuba, officials that are undergoing talks in one of the highest level meetings between Cuban and American officials for quite a long time, a pastor in Cuba was sentenced to 8 years in prison for quote unquote participating in a peaceful protest. And now there's this big shitstorm over the whole thing, and everyone coming out being like, oh, this guy's up like a martyr and a political prisoner and all this other happy horse shit. But the Cuban government claims that he was sentenced for charges of disrespect and public disorder and so on, and saying that he was part of a unrecognized church as a part of, and so on. So there's just a whole host of crazy things that is included in this report, and just how the whole thing is just crazy all around. And considering how I, as a person who is generally irreligious but has a lot of religious friends and whatnot, and friends that are right-leaning, center-right. One of my best friends is center-right. So what I think of this as someone who's center-left and someone who doesn't really give a shit about religion one way or the other. Like, I don't care if someone's religious. I don't care if someone isn't religious. But I don't really care one way or the other. So as a result, I don't really care about situations like this. But I wanted to touch base on this story because it's a big news story. And what I think of it is I personally don't care, and I've said this a million times, and I stand by this view. And of course, I know that the fucking right wing loves to hate on Cuba and loves to hate on Venezuela and all these other Latin American countries that are more left wing, and of course hate all these countries that the right wing and the neoliberals have treated like banana republics since the beginning of time. So, with all these right-wing regimes popping up all over the world, you see the way that you see what the right wing does with their power, what the far right does with their power. You see what they do. And I've said this before, like the far right religious regimes of the world, and just how crazy that they are and what they do with their power. So others call what Cuba's doing to these people authoritarian, but they never seem to mention that the pastor that Cuba sentenced to 8 years in prison was authoritarian within his own views, because a Protestant pastor protesting against Cuba's quote-unquote communist regime and so on, and how they criticize religion, and how they criticize each other, and how there's like criminalization of religion and so on and so forth. Okay, I don't agree with criminalizing religion over the other, because I personally don't care. If someone wants to practice a religion, go right ahead. Like, as long as you're not shoving it down my throat or shoving it down other people's throats, I personally don't give a fuck one way or the other. But I've said this before, I've said this a million times, and I stand by this view. I can understand where the Cubans are coming from, because they're onto something here. Because you've all known and heard about my stories on Janine Inez in Bolivia, the right-wing coup-monger and genocidal maniac and fucking freak that ousted Evo Morales in a coup in 2019 backed by Donald Trump, and then Jair Bolsonaro's fascist regime destroying the Amazon rainforest and undermining the rights of minorities day in and day out. So that's what the right wing does with their power. And this is not to defend the left wing, of course, because I don't support the far left. I am someone who's center left. I'm not with the far left of today, because the far left is just as cultish and crazy and out there as the far right is. So no, it is the left and the right. It is both. And I will acknowledge that, and I will call that shit out every fucking day. But the main focus in the world today is the right wing and what they do with their power. So the Cuban government obviously sees what they had in their country before under Batista, when the U.S. under Dwight Eisenhower backed Batista, a right-wing dictator, and that led to the Cuban Revolution with Fidel Castro taking over and ousting that regime. So ousting that regime. Venezuela before Hugo Chavez was under a right-wing regime, or at the very least a neoliberal capitalist regime or whatever. And what was Nicaragua like under Daniel Ortega, before Daniel Ortega, under the authority of right-wing rebel groups that were funded by the fucking warmonger and Ronald Reagan administration in the 1980s against the Sandinistas. So Cuba sees this, and they know their history. They know other countries' history in the region. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to prevent these right-wingers from overtaking them and imposing their own version of a dictatorship in their own country. And that's not to say that the Cuban regime doesn't have its own problems with authoritarianism and human rights, because they do. Okay, because they do. And I will admit that. I have no problem. But the reason I don't talk about it is because I don't fucking care. I don't care how Cuba runs its country. Cuba is just a country that the neoliberals and the neocons, especially the latter more so, like to hate on for their own bullshit geopolitical reasons to distract from our own problems here at home and abroad. So that's why they use Cuba. The military-industrial complex uses Cuba as a scapegoat for its own problems and to create a fucking enemy, because if it's a socialist regime, a communist regime, they don't like it. But they're okay with right-wing regimes and fascist dictatorships like Janine Áñez in Bolivia. They're okay with Jair Bolsonaro. They're okay with all these others. They're okay. They were okay with Viktor Orban in Hungary. They were okay with all these right-wing dictators, because it's the right wing that is inherently authoritarian. I mean, the right wing is where these third world African nations have their homophobia from. All these, the homophobia in Liberia and the homophobia throughout the world and throughout Latin America, throughout all these countries that are right-wing authoritarians, right-wing authoritarian regimes, and including Africa and Southeast Asia, wherever. It's all because of the right wing. And so Cuba sees this, and this is what they do. They'll lock people up for this that want to try to overtake them and want to overthrow them. And that's what they want to do with theirs. So you really are meaning to tell me that this Cuban pastor was this martyr. But that's what the Western media wants to tell you. They want to tell you that he's some kind of martyr, when you really think that Pastor Lorenzo it would not hesitate, Rosales Fajardo, I'm probably butchering that name. But do you really think that Pastor Lorenzo, we'll just call him Pastor Lorenzo, or Pastor Dumbfuck, you really think that Pastor Dumbfuck would not hesitate to impose his own version of a religious fundamentalist regime, much like we have in many sectors in the United States? You see what the right wing is doing with their power in many red states and whatnot. I think some are more crazy than others. Some get more hate, like Florida, for example. Florida's not all that bad, necessarily. Florida's not necessarily all that bad. I mean, I don't like Ron DeSantis overall, but that's a whole nother thing. I don't like many fucking politicians from Florida, Marco Rubio included, who's a right-wing fundamentalist, corrupt asshole, neocon. I don't like him, and I don't like these people, but yeah, no. I think we have to take a balanced approach to this, because it is the far right and the far left. And I criticize the far left despite being center left. And I criticize the far left because the far left is shit too, with identity politics and everything else. You name it. So one of my best friends and I were talking about this yesterday, about how the far left does these types of things. And that's true. And then, yes, it is the far left and the far right. It is both. Joe Rogan has said that before multiple different times. That's why he gets all this shit for this. So we need to call out religiosity, because religiosity comes by and large from the far right, and that's what they do with their power when they want to take over things. So I have no sympathy for these people who get locked up, and the reason I don't is because they're authoritarians themselves. They would do the same thing to leftist opponents. Look at what Janine Áñez did to left-wing opponents in Bolivia. So you're meaning to tell me that Pastor Lorenzo, if he had power in Cuba, he wouldn't be locking up Cuban communists or leftists and whatever? You don't think he would do that? You don't think the right wing would lock up their own political protesters? Oh, yes, they would. They would lock up their own political protesters and opponents. They most absolutely would, because that's history. That's what the far right has done with their power against leftist critics. But you could also make the argument that leftist regimes do the same with the right wing. Yes, they do. To some extent that is true, but that is an incomplete picture, because it's actually the far right that's doing it more than the far left. The far left does have its problems. It's shit. And I call that shit out. That's why I don't consider myself a leftist. I don't consider myself to be far left, because I don't. I have some beliefs that would be considered conservative. You know, I'm pro-capital punishment in the worst cases. I believe in the right to own weapons if you want to own weapons. I don't give a fuck. If you're not a convicted felon and and if you don't have some kind of psychosis or mental illness, I think you should have the right to own whatever gun or weapon you want. I don't give a shit. That would be considered right-wing in the left spectrum of today. So no, I'm not with those people. But nor am I with the far right of today. I'm not with any of these fucking people. I'm not with the extreme versions one way or the other. And that's what the far right is. The far right is like this. They are authoritarian in their own mind. And this pastor is authoritarian. And I'm not talking about all pastors or all religious people in churches or whatever, because I got friends that are religious and they're not authoritarian. Some of the churches they've been to are not authoritarian. I'm talking about like Protestant Christians and evangelicals. Those people are fucking authoritarian. They would not hesitate to impose their own version of a dictatorship and a religious dictatorship if they had their own way of power. So Cuba sees this, they're onto something, and I can understand where they're coming from despite my disagreements with them. Okay, I'm on the record, okay? I'm on the record of doing this type of thing, but I can understand where they're coming from. I know exactly what they're onto, and the Cubans are onto something. But of course, no one wants to give credit where credit is due. Even us lefties, who by and large, we may be against, we are not with communism, we're not with the far left. But what we do believe in is we believe in transparency, where, oh my God, these people that are criticizing Cuba are hypocrites. Because if you look at their record, they have anti-LGBT rights records, by and large, all these types of things. So when you see that, you see the hypocrisy. You see the hypocrisy that comes from the right wing. You see where that hypocrisy comes through, okay? So when you have an anti-LGBT record and you are against gay rights, gay marriage, whatever, if you sit there and you criticize Cuba for this, or if these religious groups criticize Cuba for this, for quote-unquote authoritarianism, no, you people are the fucking tyrants. You people are the tyrants. You're the tyrants against LGBT people. But you could say Cuba's tyranny against tyrannical against religion, or like whatever. Okay, yeah, that might be true, and I don't agree with it. But here's the thing. I may not agree with it, but here's the thing. I'm not gonna shed a tear. I'm not gonna lose a wink of sleep over it, okay? Because I don't really care. I don't care if authoritarians are locking up other authoritarians. It doesn't fucking matter to me because it creates this big little thing. So no, it doesn't really fucking matter to me. Okay, Christian solidarity worldwide or whatever. It's like, get the fuck out of here. Like, I personally don't care what Cuba does with its population, because it doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect the American people. Okay, it doesn't fucking affect my daily life, and it doesn't affect the national security of the United States. So therefore, us and the rest of the world and everybody else outside of Cuban borders need to stay the fuck out of it. Because with the main focus being Ron DeSantis with the whole Disney World thing, I also don't even give a shit about that either. And Vladimir Putin against Ukraine, I stopped caring about that a long time ago too. Ukraine's kicking their ass, so I don't think it's as big of a deal. But there, of course, what Russia is doing is horrible to Ukraine, and it's fucked up by every stretch of the imagination. And by the way, Vladimir Putin is a right-wing corrupt dictator and an asshole. So, just like all these other dictators. So you see you see these types of things. You see what they do with their power. So you see it, it's all there, you do. But that's the main focus. We should focus on what's going on here at home. We should focus on and keep our money towards here and stay the fuck out of these countries' affairs and their business, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me who Cuba puts in prison. It doesn't fucking matter to me. And I don't have sympathy for these religious groups because they're all authoritarian themselves. They are everything that they accuse Cuba of being. So there you have it. So authoritarians getting locked up. So, and yes, they are authoritarian. Religious groups like this are authoritarian. And I don't care one way or the other what happened. I don't care. Because I don't really care. Because that's exactly what they would want to do to others if they had their power. So it's kind of like, preach it. You preach it, and this is what happens. You're preaching this shit literally, and this is what happens. You play authoritarian games, you're going to get authoritarian prizes. It's as simple as that. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up here. I got other things to do today, and I'm and I'm gonna chill out, relax, and go pick up Steven and go for a walk, relax, and do all that other stuff, and upload this video, well, with the time I have before I go back to work tomorrow. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Hope everyone's doing well. I'll see you all again in the next video. More content in the works. Stay tuned to find out more videos on the way. This is Zach, the Celtics guy, saying thank you for watching. See you all again next time. See you all again in the next video. This is another episode of hypocrisy in global affairs coming out of the religious right wing, and what happens to them in other countries that are more leftist, and you see what happens when they try to overtake them. So no, I can understand where the Cuban government's coming from. I understand it perfectly, because they see what happens when religious fundamentalists try to take over other countries. They see what happens. They want to prevent them from taking over them. Whether you agree or disagree, it's, you know, whatever. We can agree to disagree, but that's just how it is in global affairs. Like, that's just how it is in global affairs, and the whole thing is really fucked up, because this shit really needs fixing. The less religion, the better. But that's just me. You believe in a religion, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you for it. It's your business. Live and let live, people. That's all I believe in. Bye for now. Peace out, and have a good day.